And if you read the Ninth and 10th Amendments, it's very clear that they weren't interested in creating every possible law at the federal level.
Free Talk Live.
David from New Mexico, you're on Free Talk Live.
I was calling to continue. I started discussing with you, Chris, when you were, I think it was the first day that you were in the chair number 1 there. And I made the mistake of phrasing my point in a manner that I can. You jumped on it, and the conversation went a direction I didn't mean it to. So I wanted to continue that, and I kind of tied into you today. Earlier, you were talking about Uyghurs, and this kind of ties in. Nobody really thinks it's a bad thing when two groups of people combine their peoples to make an even larger country than their two separate countries. Generally speaking, people think of that as not a bad thing. They don't really think much negative about it, right. Generally speaking. But if when one group of people within a larger nation want to leave because they're a homogenous group of people, then there's all kinds of problem with that. Everybody has a problem with that, like in the case of Uyghurs. Now let me kind of sidestep again. What I had tried to call up about was I had made the mistake of saying, to get back to where we were, I said something like that the states exist at the leisure of the federal government.
Yes.
And which is, and as I will show, is true at this point, at the point in time that we are now. It's not, but what you keyed on was the inception at the beginning.
Right.
And you're correct that it was the other way around. However, it has, over time, and even at its inception, I guess it was partially true, in that when the states agreed to be bound together by the documents
yes.
that they created.
In a compact of states, yes.
Yeah, they agreed to abide by certain minimum rights to the various parties, certain minimum rights, especially to regarding the people. And what we have...
Well, to be clear, I think they did that. They agreed that there were going to be certain limitations on the states, very few. And if you read the Ninth and 10th Amendments, it's very clear that they weren't interested in creating every possible law at the federal level. Where the
right.
real teeth of that document show up is how much it limits government and how much it limits a central government. The problem is they quickly figured out that I don't think we really want to follow this, guys. And that's where you have the Federalists rise up and really push us away from the idea of a constitutional republic.
Got it. And here's thinking coming from the standpoint of an individual. Here's where there is one of the many problems, is that generally speaking, we without defining we think of the states as more noble and sensitive to the needs of the individual person than the federal government. However, especially it's probably, I think it's true in other states as well, but it is especially true in the state of New Mexico because of the history of the state of New Mexico having been founded by a homogenous people that came from Spain to Mexico and then up the Rio Grande River and were settled this state of New Mexico basically for hundreds of years before anybody else arrived. And so they kind of got set in their ways in a patron system, so to speak. And then we outsiders came in and tried to live here too. And the natives, meaning not the Indians, they'd already been pushed aside by the Spaniards. But the natives, being the Spaniards, don't really like, me being a whitey coming in here and demanding my rights too. And so in New Mexico, there's a situation where the state is actually less sensitive to the rights of the individual than the federal government. And that's where I was going with that.
Yeah.
In invoking the protections of the federal government, saying to the state of New Mexico that you exist at the pleasure of the United States, meaning that you're not following those minimum rules, regulations, laws that were ordained
Right.
to protect the individual. You, the state of New Mexico, are violating those as evidenced, by New Mexico is one of the states that has the federal government, the Department of Justice.
Right.
It has taken over the Albuquerque Police Department, for example.
Yeah, David,
And,
I appreciate the call, and absolutely, I don't disagree with you. I think one of the key points there is when New Mexico was added to the Union, it was one of the last states, the 47th state, about 1910, 1912, somewhere in there. So after the Civil War, you have all these requirements that states include things in their constitution that swears their fealty to the idea of a central government. And conversely, if you look at some place like New Hampshire, which was one of the original 13, we have an article of revolution, Article 10 in the New Hampshire Constitution, that says if government becomes too big, you have a moral obligation to throw it off. And
good luck with that.
Well, yeah, at the same time, we have an RSA that bans militias.
Just saying that gets you put on an FBI watch list, though,
Just like that. I wonder if they keep just one watch list or if they have like 50 million different ones, because I think I'm on 49 million of those probably for various things I've said.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.